Our main speaker is Matt Teskey, whose company Chargeway has developed an app to simplify public charging.
Thank you, Keith, and to Keith and Bob, thank you so much for the opportunity to meet with everyone today during your guys' meeting. I love seeing the information about what you shared about recent events and the success you've had, and so appreciate just the time and opportunity to discuss Chargeway. And so a little bit of background on myself. What I'll do is I'll bring up a quick screen share here that has some information, then we'll kind of dive right in a bit. So hopefully this will translate pretty quickly. So hopefully you can all see my screen on your end.
Yeah, we're good.
Perfect. So again, my name is Matt Teskey, and I'm the founder and CEO of Chargeway. And as the title slide states, our goal is simplifying EV charging for new EV drivers everywhere. That's really our goal. Is as all of us know who have been driving EVs for a long time, we all had to learn something, and by the something, and oftentimes it's a lot. And so to really help transition, especially these opportunities when we do public events and we get a chance to chat with newcomers and have a lot of questions, is how can we bring a lot of this conversation down to earth so we're not really scaring people through all the things they might need to learn. That's really the goal of Chargeway, is to be a translator for a lot of that. So some really quick background information on myself. I've been actually working within the automotive sector for over 20 years. And so my background is automotive. Grew up in Southern California, actually, and did a lot of work for years with General Motors and Toyota, building out specialty vehicles for the SEMA show in Las Vegas, and working on new vehicle launch programs with various OEMs, doing auto dealership training, and a lot of work within the automotive aftermarket. The goal through all that for me was I was a car guy. So it was great to get a chance to tinker on and work with various cars over the years. But amidst all that and through my process of being in automotive, I also had a passion for storytelling and what does that look like? So my experience with automotive actually led to the development of a marketing and branding agency where I had a chance to work with a lot of different other brands outside of automotive, including Nike and others, to develop out what is the story we're telling about a product. And amidst all of that process, I still had this thing in the back of my mind of where are we taking the planet? Where are we going with all the things we're working on, and especially within automotive and the work I had maintained doing there. And through that process, I began to make my own decision to switch to an electric car. And so why am I here today? What am I talking about? Well, as I mentioned, switching to an EV, what is the process of that? And this is just a little quick story about where the inception of Chargeway came from. As many of you listening today probably had experience with, you learned in a process over the years of owning EV as to the different things you need to know. And when I convinced my wife to buy our first electric car, which was a 2013 Volt shown here, I was really excited. We bought the car and we were going to go on a road trip. And I planned the road trip by calling the resort we're staying at and saying, do you have charging stations? To which they said yes. And I said, this is easy. So we hopped in the car. And this is how we looked. So I felt so excited to be driving our first EV, and it was going to be great. And then we got to the resort check-in. The woman behind the counter, I said, oh, really quickly, I called in advance. I have a question for you. Where are your EV chargers? And then immediately the conversation changed, where she said, oh, I need to get the maintenance guy for you. And then I said, who's that? And literally some guy that looked like this walked out. And Tony, the maintenance guy, said, follow me. We then walked out to the parking lot. And as we walked past our car and every car in the parking lot, I then began to see what was coming from the distance, which was a wooden shed at the end of the parking lot. And then he leaned over at the wooden shed and flipped open an electrical outlet and said, there you go, buddy. And I thought, well, that's not a charging station, So, and immediately I have this look on my face because I'm flipping out that I thought I'm a car guy. Like I know how to do this. But then on the other side of the conversation was my wife, who was looking at me like this. Why did we just buy this car? And literally at dinner that night, my wife asked me the question. She said, you are a car guy. And so how is it you couldn't figure this out? And if this was me, how would I do this? And I thought, well, it really can't be that bad, is it? And what I realized very quickly was I got it wrong, and many of the general public gets it wrong. It's really not about the fact that they're buying a new car. That's not what we really want people to learn and understand more easily. It's really about electric fuel and electricity as a fuel being the new element that they're really going to have to learn how to use. And oftentimes that comes back to their lifestyle and how they live, where they live, etc. So I kept thinking of it this way: is how do we talk to the public about this? And again, with the events that your association holds all the time, these are conversations that come up a lot. And at face value, for example, if we put these two trucks side by side, average people would just say they're Ford F-150 Lightnings. We, as EV owners and enthusiasts and experienced drivers, would say something like, well, no, it's really what's under the skin. It's behind the scenes what you need to learn. And that's really what we wanted to figure out through Chargeway and through my own experiences was, how do we help people navigate that quickly for what they'll need to know? And so that experience that we all know about is how you fill up. There's a lot of nuance to it. And this is really the way that we think about it, is that everybody that comes to an event that you might hold where people are going to come up and ask questions, they're all kind of coming from this space, whereas they have different lifestyles. Could be an executive that lives in the hills, a college student that rents an apartment, drives a Corolla, a businesswoman with a condo in downtown, maybe a rancher who has a farm, or a construction worker who rents a room from his sister. They all have very different lifestyles, but gas is the great equalizer that most people have known for the last 100 years when it comes to driving. So even though they have different lifestyles, they all have to go get gas, and it's all pretty much the same way, but they don't actually really think about the details. They just go get regular or premium, and it takes them 10 minutes. They don't necessarily know how a combustion engine works. But if tomorrow, let's say, for example, these 5 people decided they wanted to buy EVs, we as experienced owners know this is kind of the conundrum that they have to start navigating, is depending on their lifestyle, depending on where they live, they might be able to fill up at work, at home, and publicly, or they might only be able to fill up publicly. And based on that, it's not just where they can fill up, it's different plug types, different power levels. And amidst all of that, there's a lot to understand for how charging works for you and the car that you drive and where you stop to fill up. And so this is a lot for anybody to learn. For those of us who were early adopters, who were excited about making the switch, we were willing to dig through all this to learn things because we were excited to learn it. But in reality, it really comes down to the charge time for most people, is understanding how long does it take to fill up. And they come in with a preconceived notion of, I can fill up my gas car anywhere. So is that how charging works? I can go to any charger? Not exactly. And does every charger fill me up at the same time? Not exactly. So we kept thinking, we got to do more than just put a lightning bolt pin on the map. We can't just say charging is here and then hope they want to figure out the details. Let's help them understand with a wayfinding system that's more easy. And really it boils down to, how do they know about a fill up time ranging between what could be 15 minutes at a 350 kilowatt charger, or it might be 48 hours or longer plugging into that wall outlet or that shed that guy showed me one time. So really, one thing I want to talk about today is what we look at is how do people think, and really looking at what I've approached for communication in my career is asking, are we asking the right questions about how people are really processing information? And at the end of the day, those of us who wanted to learn information about EV charging, we were excited to, but most people have daily lives that really information overload is very honest. Whether it's work or personal lives, there's a lot of things they're doing daily. And a gas car just sort of fits into that. And they just use it, regardless of the things that go along with it, such as, having to go find a gas station. It's smelly, it's stinky, they got to do it. It just is something they can do easily, and they don't have to really think that hard about it. But at the end of the day, we're trying to break through all of this discussion with everyday people that lead everyday lives, whether it's shopping, going to the game, they've got kids, they want to go to a movie, they're working from home, they go on vacation. We need to fit electricity as a fuel type into all of these different elements of life in a way that feels simple. And what oftentimes happens, unfortunately, is when someone has to learn something new, they run into something that is called decision fatigue. It's been well documented, where it's just tough to learn that new thing, and it can become overwhelming quickly. And if they get overwhelmed quickly, as we're trying to explain, for example, different plug types and different power levels and amps and volts, they just might turn around and say, you know what, this is too much. And oftentimes people do that. And oftentimes those two responses when they get overwhelmed is, number one is they might be reckless. Good old Ron Burgundy in San Diego, when it was a hot day and he was overwhelmed with heat, milk is a bad choice because he was overwhelmed. Or the other choice that someone might make is not to be reckless, but they might just do nothing. They might not change what they do. But if we're trying to get more people into EVs, we really want them to change what they've been doing. And amidst all of this discussion, this is really consumer psychology of how people think. The reality of it is this is true for all of us. And at the end of the day, you might think of the fact that if you say, this doesn't really happen to me, think about the last time you had a very long day and you're talking to your spouse and the question comes up of, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? And the I don't care bar and grill would be first on your list because you're like, I don't care. I just want to go eat. I'm not even thinking about this. And so that's what we're really thinking about is the consumer psychology of comfort and helping them understand something quickly so they don't just jump to not caring. And at the end of the day, car ownership in America has been this for the last 100 years. Freedom. They can choose whatever car they want. And gasoline's sort of waiting in the background, making their gas car work for them. Could be a truck, it could be a car, it could be an SUV, but it is the ability to move freely. And the vehicle that you choose is kind of a personalization of who you are. So if they have to get through that new fuel discussion, we have to think about how they're responding. So what that means really is communication matters, and how we communicate, how we talk about charging needs to be approachable. And the way that I think of this is between logic and emotion. and how people respond differently, kind of right brain, left brain. And in the realm of communication, marketing, and branding, let's think about how the fuel people use right now that is not electricity but gasoline, how do they understand it? And how is this presented to them on a regular basis? Well, Chevron, for example, if you think of the billboards they have, fuel for your car, fuel for you. They just simplify with these cute little images. Or Techron, it's even why our regular is special. They're not really talking about how it works. They're just making people feel comfortable. Or cars can't resist Techron, yum, yum, yum. This is the type of imagery and information people are accustomed to that you don't have to think very hard about this. It just makes you feel kind of happy. And Shell, they do something similar. It helps your engine run like new. You may not be able to afford to buy a new car, but our gasoline makes your car run like new. It's that feeling of this works for me and I don't have to think too hard, but it makes me feel good. And all of this is based on emotion. This is just about comfort. It's not about teaching, it's about feeling. And amidst the process of learning about how people respond to these things, I kept thinking about how are we doing this as an industry for the electric car? How are we talking about charging? And in contrast, this is how we approach explaining charging is schematic drawings. We have amps and volts. We have kilowatts and kilowatt hours. We have a variety of different diagrams and ways we can define it. Sometimes we use levels 1, 2, and 3, they sneak in there, but we refer to level 3 as any kind of fast charger. That could be from 20 kilowatts all the way up to 400. Depending on your vehicle, that is a massive wait time comparison. So referring to all that as one level is also confusing when someone learns the details. And so this is a logical approach. It's really not an emotional approach. So how do we spin it in such a way that helps someone see it and understand it in a way that they don't have to be thinking, they can just feel like, wow, this will work for me. And that's really the intent for Chargeway. And it's really to get away from this approach, which is we're already seeing terms like supercharging get used differently. Just today on an ID4 owners group, someone said, I use superchargers when I'm road tripping. And I said, well, do you have a Tesla? He said, no, but I use supercharging. I said, well, that's the problem is he's referring to a phrase that Tesla uses, whereas, for example, Electrify America, they recently came out with ultra and hyper charging. Or, for example, the government, how they refer to fast charging or ultra fast. These terms aren't even aligning and they're being constantly used and swapped around. And is it really helping people understand how it works? The answer is no, it's just kind of adding more fluff. And so at the end of the day, it really comes down to this is how do we help people understand switching from something where they just can call it regular to a very complex system of how they use a new fuel type. And that's really what our goal was at Chargeway. So this kind of sets the stage for how I was thinking about it, just with my background, how we approached it as a company. So if we know it's confusing and complicated, how do we simplify? Well, as my wife asked me, how is everyone else going to do this if I couldn't even figure out as a car guy? And so this is kind of how we looked at it. We said, well, everything with gas is universal except for, well, the price can be variable and sometimes high. And obviously people hate that when it happens, but otherwise it's pretty straightforward. Whereas with charging, we as experienced drivers might know, we know there's multiple connectors. We know there's multiple stations and charger designs and layouts. There's multiple times at which you can fill up because of the power level. There's payment methods that might differ, but if you can fill up at home, the price is pretty stable and pretty low. That is a benefit, but there's not enough benefit to maybe swap someone to say it's as easy or as simple. So we have to think about these multiples. And so if we know all these things, then the question is if these 5 people that, as an example, might want to switch based on their lifestyles, they're going to need to know which stations they use based on the car they select. They're going to also ask the question of, well, how long does charging take? Because we know it's not universal in time. And at the end of the day, as we always hear is when the phrase range anxiety and others is where can I travel to? How do I know I can make it with confidence? Does the car have the distance? And really range anxiety is less about the car having distance. It's more about fuel anxiety. Is there enough information I can know to fill up again with confidence as I always have with maybe a gas car? And so if this is how complex charging is, our goal is to say, well, then we got to simplify this experience down some. And if we know that charge time is the ultimate goal for someone to understand how it impacts their life, we said, all right, well then let's create a wayfinding system for people that cuts through the engineering terminology and gives them something that is easy to quickly say and learn and also visualize as a system. So we translated everything for plug types into simple colors, green, blue, and red. So green covering J1772 and CCS, blue covering CHAdeMO, and red covering Tesla. And then this simple number system, it captures different categories, similar to what we kind of do at home with levels 1 and 2, but also taking that further to really help people differentiate how fast charging might differ with levels 3 through 7. And this is as a system, it number one can help explain where options are based on how you live. So for example, you can know that at home, it's an easier way to say, as we do now, level 1 and 2 at home, but then we can identify more easily visually how that might look for home and compared to work. Or also saying at public charging, you really are going to find every single option. And it's not just saying level 2 and DC fast, it's really knowing how those categorizations of power level differ. And so what that then creates is a jumping off point to say, if we can take all that information from the charging networks and the vehicles through Chargeway, we said, well, let's run it through what we've developed out as a way to translate it so that people can use something simple to understand how the vehicle they've selected aligns with different charging networks and options in a way that has a visual treatment that isn't just a pin on a map with a lightning bolt, but actually shows them that they can connect by color and shows the power levels so they know how it impacts what will be their wait time. And so how does this then work? As an example, charging isn't universal, but Ford with the F-150 Lightning, this is the basic information you might see from a dealership or in their marketing terminology, which is it's a J1772 connector for AC charging up to 19.2 kilowatts, CCS DC fast charging up to 150 kilowatt. They market that it can go from 10 to 80% in about 40 minutes. And most people hear that and they take it at face value. They say, so I can always fill up in 40 minutes? And the answer is no. But if they use a system such as Chargeway, they could be able to quickly identify based on their vehicle's charging capability and a station's capability what their wait time would look like. If they were at a level 3 fast charger, for example, in Chargeway, that's 25 kilowatt, that's a 6-hour charge. Level 4, that's more of a 50 kilowatt charger, that's a 3-hour charge. And as you see, you ramp up the power level and it really gets them to that knowledge base of there's a best case scenario, but I have these other options that I do need to understand. And this is just an easier way to approach it. And what this really provides is a way to explain charging, not just for maybe the Lightning, but for any type of plug-in car. For a plug-in hybrid, for example, that uses gas for obviously for long distance driving, this car is a green 2 capable car. It can only go up to level 2. It lives within the system in a way that is also easy to navigate. And it also allows people to understand that they can't fast charge because their car has a peak power capability. Or maybe it's a vehicle that has 2 plug types, such as the Leaf, using green plugs for standard charging and blue plugs for fast charging. Similarly, you can navigate your options as a Leaf owner. And this even works for Tesla owners as well. Just simply different colored plug, but power works in a way that they can understand how it impacts their charge time. And so what this then creates, obviously, as a wayfinding system is identified for plug type and power level and how it applies to each car. And so how does this all work? Well, this is where we developed out, as Keith mentioned, a software platform and a mobile app. And we first developed and debuted this just before COVID in 2019. And we were test marketing it with a few partners up here in Oregon where we're based, including utility partners as well as auto dealers, to really measure twice and cut once. Are we answering the right questions that help different stakeholders, such as utilities, auto dealers, understand how to communicate? But at the end of the day, are people that are buying EVs that are new to the process, is this allowing them to make the decision in a way with more confidence? Does it help a dealer explain EVs with more confidence and sell them with more confidence? And really, that's what we found. And what it then is created around is not just here's a mobile app with charging pins and lightning bolts and saying there's charging here. It really is tailored to the vehicle you choose to drive and your lifestyle. So you choose your vehicle and then it will then tailor the map that you see on the station map to the vehicle you selected. You only see your plug colors and your power levels. And this also includes details such as a station finder. There's a lot of apps that do this, obviously, for station finding, but this is, again, really doing a lot of thinking in advance on behalf of newcomers to EVs. So if you've selected a Bolt, for example, the Bolt goes to green stations, and it shows that the Bolt has a max charging power level of level 4. This also shows them they can go to any of these stations that are on the map, but there are certain stations that offer more power than their car can accept. And a way to then explain how these different options work for their wait time is we built in a charge time estimator that allows them to actually understand how those power levels will dictate and impact their wait time. And so they can see station details, they can see what network is offered at a station pin, but if they want to understand exactly how this will impact how they fill up, this charge time estimator will provide them that. And it really is, again, it captures all the engineering data, but it translates it in a way that average people can look at it and quickly understand what they need to know, which is, I go to these stations with these plugs, and I know that power impacts my wait time in this way. without really having to force them to understand how the engineering works. It just helps them understand how it meets their needs based on the car they've selected. And lastly, with station identification done and charge time explained, is a robust trip planner that's built in. You can choose your starting location, destination, you can set the temperature outside, and you can set the speed at which you want to drive. And this will automatically adjust what your maximum range can be based on those conditions, and then be a dynamic trip planner that selects your charging stops based on those details. So oftentimes we'll hear people say they have one app for trip planning, one app for station finding, etc. We really wanted Chargeway to be a one-stop shop for people. And not only can they learn quickly, but it gives them the tools they need to plan not only trip with confidence, but also find local charging with confidence. And so at the end of all of this, what we wanted to create was something that left people in this position, is a tailored experience for every EV driver everywhere. Is instead of saying, here's an app you can download, there's pins and you can see charging, but you got to figure out the details and learn the engineering terminology to understand all these differences, or here's another app where you can plan a trip. This was really designed to say, you tell us who you are, and this does the rest of the thinking for you. It shows you where you and your car can go with confidence. You know you can connect. It gives you details on each station for what network's there, and it also information such as photos shared by the drivers, or the social aspect of that. But then also provides the ability to go further and plan a road trip and understand how that will meet your needs, not just locally, but beyond. And really trying to take all that we've all had to learn as early adopters, as I assume many of us are on the call today, but really making it so that not only do we have a better tool that we can use, but also a tool that we can then work with friends and family and people that ask us questions. I found myself very quickly diving into the details too fast with friends when I got my first EV and was very excited. And they said, this is too much. But in this instance, we can say, hey, what car do you think you're excited about? Is it a 94, Ioniq 6, Mach-E, Lightning, Tesla, who names it, or you name it. And this gives them the ability to say, well, this is a way for me to quickly see what that vehicle can do for my driving needs. And it's built on the engineering, but it's a little bit more approachable. So simple colors for plugs, simple numbers for power levels, and then an app that gives them options for how to use an EV of their choice. So this is a high level overview, both of the methodology that Chargeway used to get to where we got to for developing out our app, and also what it provides as a tool for those of us who are meeting with people every day, especially from owners groups and associations that really want to help people get into EVs more easily and with more confidence. So I hope this provides a great overview for what we're doing. For all of you that are listening and on the call today, I hope that you can also download Chargeway, which both for iOS and Android. Give it a shot, test it out, see what you think. If you already have it, thank you. But I hope that this has been informative and helpful. And again, I truly appreciate the invitation from Keith and Bob for your hospitality, for giving us the opportunity to chat today. And obviously here to answer any questions for anybody who has questions right now.
All right, thank you.
Does anyone have any questions, Larry? Or
Yes, I heard Android, but did you say Apple also?
Yes.
iOS. And then is there a fee to download, pay for the app? And what's
The app is free for drivers.
Okay, and then what states do your maps cover?
So the Chargeway is for all of North America, all 50 states as well as Canada.
This is Simon. I have a question, and this is sort of looking down the road. First of all, wonderful presentation. Enjoyed your explanation of dumbing things down for those of us who can't chew and walk at the same time. That would be me. But moving on from that, right at the beginning of your presentation, you touched upon something there's always been something I've wondered about, and that is whenever I do a road trip, I don't go to Marriott, or I go to a website that'll direct me to hotels with chargers. And I always try and pick the hotel with the most chargers. Do you foresee an ability to amend your app where you can go ahead and reserve a charger at a hotel? Or is that just too far down the road?
No, this is something that we've obviously gotten questions about, as many drivers will select trip planning based around what you described. One of the things that's difficult is you might know with reservations is, number one is if you try to reserve it digitally, you don't know if physically it will not be blocked. That's a problem. But one thing we do in our app currently is for any hotel where there is a level 2 charger available, as an example, is we list that as a non-network charger. Oftentimes this is Flipper Creek level 2 charger that might have been installed. We always advise drivers to call in advance to confirm that that is available, because you don't want to just show up. So we try to provide, simple wayfinding elements around little things they're going to need to learn. And so as to how we can filter against that and provide the ability to filter against only stations where there are nearby hotels, we do have an amenities section that is listed with every station detail. So you can see if there's a hotel nearby based on what is routed for your trip. So we have yet to build out a filtering system specifically for hotels, but there are some touch points and elements we already do incorporate into the app that allow people to see if there's a hotel nearby, but also help them understand that they do need to call in advance to ensure that the charger is available for their needs if they do plan on staying at that hotel.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up. This is Larry. I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
I have two friends that recently got used Chevy Bolts, so I'm definitely going to recommend this to them. And in fact, the first guy was saying, how many companies do I have to coordinate with? So this coordinates with all of the different charging companies, is that correct?
Yeah, so it covers all 70,000 stations in North America and all of the major networks, which is about 30 at this point growing.
But to pay for the charge?
So you still have to pay for charging, obviously, at the different stations and different networks. So we do list the pricing at locations based on the network that you select. So that's in the station details. And based on that information, some stations do not provide their pricing information up front. So for example, if it's a non-network location that where a hotel might charge you, we have to find that information. So we do rely on feedback from drivers on that, but they still do have to obviously pay for public charging, and we do provide that for major networks for the price.
So do you have to still sign up for each company or just sign up through Chargeway?
And that's the major detail right now is you still do have to sign up with different individual networks. Yeah.
Also repeat what Simon said. It was very easy to understand what you're doing. So that's, I'm going to introduce it to those two new EV owners. And my second final question is, how about dealers? Are you approaching dealerships with this app for them to share with the potential or the people who buy the EVs?
That's a great question. And actually, one thing I didn't include in the presentation today is we do have a solution for dealerships. If you go to the chargeway.net, our website, and click on dealers, we have a kiosk version of our software, which we call the Beacon. And it is essentially identical to what you have in the mobile app, but it also has an additional section for incentive information, and as well as a fuel cost comparison tool. So inside the showroom, dealers have the ability to show charging stations for the branded vehicle they offer, explain charging time with the charge time estimator, plan a road trip, but then they can also talk to what the cost to charge at home might be if you're a homeowner charging with SDG&E, for example. And we do have a Chargeway beacon at Capistrano Volkswagen. So it's not in San Diego, but it's near San Diego. So if you wanted to stop by and look at that at the dealership, and we actually work with 60 different dealerships nationwide right now in 8 different states that are using Chargeway in their showrooms.
Nice, thank you. Any other questions, or Bob?
I wasn't quite sure whether you touched on it with Larry. Do you include anything about pricing in this? Or do you plan to?
For pricing at stations, for example?
Yes.
Yeah, if you any station pin on the map that you click on, it will show you a quick view of what the network is, what the address is, reviews from drivers. And if you click on that pop-up, there's full detailed information about the station, including pricing based on the level of your vehicle or based on if it's by charge time, as well as contact information for each of the networks based on whichever station you're at. You can simply tap the number, contact the network if you have questions, set up an account, things of that nature. But for pricing information for all major networks, it is listed inside of the app on the station details.
Does that include some useful information like what amenities are at the charge stop, like restrooms, Wi-Fi, food?
Yeah, so there's 3 major categories inside the station details section. Included first is station details for network, phone number, pricing, etc. There's a second tab for amenities. If you click on that, it'll show you nearby amenities for shopping, restrooms, anything from hotels, things of that nature. And you can click on those tabs. For example, if there's a Starbucks or a hotel, you can click on any of those icons to contact that location. And then the third option is for reviews. You can either write a review as a driver, or if there's an issue with the station, you can report a problem directly to the network from the Chargeway app. And we also get a copy of that, so we know that a user has let us know there's a problem, and we can follow up with that network if there's a maintenance issue.
Great presentation, Matt. Thank you. I was a EV adopter in 2014, and I've been trying to convince my family. Actually, they're back in the Boston area to convert to EV, and it's been tough. So I think your company will definitely help me educating them. So my question to you is there any, what's the best way to find out whether one of your beacons is at any dealership around the Massachusetts area?
So yeah, dealership wise, we do not currently, a lot of our programs have been pilots. And so a lot of the partners we have where we've deployed beacons in showrooms have actually been through utility programs. So we actually partner with 14 different utilities around the US currently. And we are updating our website to actually show a map of where dealerships are that use Chargeway. These have all, as I mentioned, have been done directly with utilities to date as pilots, but those pilots are now converting over into full-scale programs. So we hope to have that updated here by, I would hope sometime this summer, to really have a map showing which dealerships you can go to. As of right now, we do not have any dealerships in Massachusetts that are using Chargeway. The closest to that would be in New York. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
New York City or New York State?
New York City. So, and we actually just came back from the New York Auto Show where the New York Power Authority invited us to be a part of their display at the show. And we had 2 beacons on display during the show, and they are going to be distributing those out coming here in the next month or two. We're not sure if it's going to be in New York City directly or if it's going to be at their visitor centers throughout the state. They're making that decision currently.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Bob?
One of our members just recently got back from a trip to Boston, and there he rented a electric vehicle from Hertz. Do you have any thing that you're doing with the car rental companies or anybody else that might be having people experience an EV for the first time?
Yes, Hertz is definitely something that we have on our radar for who we've been talking to. So we have a few partners that we work with that have a relationship with Hertz. And I agree with you. I've rented EVs through Hertz for the last year or so, and they do not really have a lot of helpful information as of yet that will help a driver be a first-time EV driver through their rental process. And that is definitely something that we are working on right now to provide them the ability for people to either use Chargeway during their rental or somehow integrate more directly with Hertz on those rental agreements to have them actually use Chargeway based on the rental they have. These are things that we're just having discussions about right now, but I agree that this is an example of an automotive entity approaching this from an automotive perspective, simply just getting the car into their fleet, but not really thinking about the details that a driver will need to know compared to renting a Polestar 2, for example, and how that might differ from a long-range Tesla Model 3 or Model Y. So that is definitely something we're working on right now. So.
I had another question if there's nobody else asking.
Just hold on a second, Simon.
Sure.
Hey Matt, so what do you see? So it's a great way to break it down, this very complex subject. So now that you're at this stage, right, like very digestible information out there, what do you see still, why we're not progressing faster in terms of EV adoption? What are the areas of opportunity that we have it? I'm totally outside of the industry. I'm trying to transition. I'm trying to figure out how I can best support that.
I'll be very candid. We have a lot of success when we talk to the general public, but oftentimes when we talk to people that are within the industry, we've actually gotten a lot of pushback from people who have said, no, people need to learn and they will learn kilowatts, or they will learn J1772 and CCS and other things. And I think partly because that's what has been the standard practice for years now, and we're approaching it differently and thinking of it differently. I think the more advocacy that we get from owners and associations such as EDA and people that recognize the importance of simplifying this because of the experiences that they've had by communicating with family members, friends who just say, yeah, you know what, this just sounds too difficult, would be very helpful to the process. I think beyond that, we still have an issue with the fact that we are combining the automotive industry with the utility industry for all intents and purposes. And those are two industries that really have not collaborated in the past. The auto sector is very accustomed to having a partner such as fossil fuels that has really managed and maintained and simplified the other product that's needed for car ownership, being up to date, being gasoline. And when EVs became more prominent, thanks to brands like Tesla for really kind of pushing the narrative forward, the automotive sector didn't respond in a way that they understood really the ecosystem of an EV owner. And a good example is when the Bolt was unveiled in 2017, Mary Barra was asked, the CEO of GM, what is your plan for infrastructure? And at the time, she said nothing. Now, that was 6 years ago. Now there's an obvious change in narrative from GM, but I think OEMs are kind of learning as they're going. And at the same time, utilities, they haven't really ever had to market what they do. They have monopolies here in the United States. And so an issue there is, from a communication perspective, EVs could basically fail tomorrow and utilities would still be in business. And they would say, regardless of EV success or not, we just provide electricity. But they do need to reimagine how they position themselves from a messaging perspective and from a product perspective that is very new to them. And essentially, they are replacing fossil fuels for the automotive experience in a way that they need to provide easy to understand information, how electricity as a fuel works, where it can be purchased, how it can be used by different drivers, different places. And this is also very new to them. And we're at the very beginning of these realities for these major industries. And to be honest, they're still figuring that out. So I think for how we can do a better job of really accelerating that, truth be told, you have a lot of industries that are figuring that out as they're going, but we have the option and opportunity as drivers and advocates and enthusiasts to help point to better solutions that, if we get a better uptick on that, such as something like Chargeway, where we simplify how to explain charging, that's something that business will naturally begin to leverage. But if we maintain the process of people saying, well, this is just what it is, it's a J1772 7.2 AC kilowatt connector, and that's what a utility says, and that's what an engineer and an automaker says, we're going to keep stumbling with connecting with the general public from a communication perspective. And so we are doing our best with the utility partners we have to help them see the roles they can play and how that can be different. And we're having some success, but there are 3,300 utilities in the United States, and we currently only work with 14. So, and we're at the beginning of a long conversation in that respect. And we're fighting some kind of incumbent processes that we need to kind of help people rethink and relearn how we can be more effective at communication.
Chat question?
I noticed that Eric has a chat question.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm not on mute anymore. I think before I ask that question, actually, this is the more related question. So as I understand it, the user has an app which shows them the color coding, depending on, generally as a Tesla or other kind of cars, and then the number system. Have you thought about doing an alternate view, instead of showing numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, showing the actual charge times?
Mm-hmm.
Since that's, me being from a customer point of view, that's kind of ultimately what I want to know, and not having to do a mapping to the 7 and then go, oh, what's going to be the time?
No, that's a great question. And that's something that we're working on for version 2 of Chargeway right now, actually, is we are going to be able to add in real-time status from the 10 top major networks, as well as the ability for a driver to have an option to upgrade their app to having real-time status of state of charge of their vehicle. With that better real-time data, we can apply a more accurate charge time to a station pin, for example. And so we're looking at the options for how we represent that. One of the things we've run into is you have to then think about what do those potential user interface and user experience details begin to look like. If it's a 20-minute charge, it might be 20 MIN. But then if it's potentially, an 8-hour charge, an 8-hour and 15-minute charge, you start to run into how does that represent on a map in a way that doesn't maybe overwhelm with content. And
Right.
So the wayfinding system of the numbers is a way for people to understand that power is associated with better time. And then we can apply the time more effectively to those pins with this update that we're making. But that's definitely something we've been looking at, is how do we take that charge time estimation and apply it just as an overlay directly onto the station map itself. And we're testing some things right now on that. And frankly, we should be in beta testing on that here in the next 2 to 3 months. And we'd love to have people from associations such as yours give it a test and let us know what you think.
And then a quick follow-up on that. I was the person who rented the Tesla in Boston, but even even with that, driving a Tesla, it's all geared towards whether it's on your phone app or whether it's on the screen in the car, it's all where's the Tesla chargers. But of course, I personally also use like ChargePoint and other level 2 chargers. And then on my trip, that's all I did do. So I see the need for your solution there for a Tesla person to say, hey, open up the world to more than just the Tesla ecosystem.
That's a great point, actually. And one of the things we have built into Chargeway is if you are a Tesla owner and you select your Tesla in Chargeway, in the station filtering section, we have the ability to just simply turn on your adapters that you have. So if you've purchased the CCS adapter, or if you've purchased the CHAdeMO adapter, or if you did get the J1772 adapter with your vehicle, you can simply hit a switch inside of the filter section to then activate seeing those on the map directly. And so if you just want to know where your level 2 chargers are, hit the switch, go back to your map, and you will see green 2 pins added to your map. And then you can also then go into networks and filter by network to choose to say, I only want to use ChargePoint for my green 2 option. Then you can just turn off all the other networks that you don't want to use. So.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
All right, Simon, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I did, and I think you might have already answered it in responding to Eric. And let me tell you what I think the answer was. I was going to ask, when will you have the ability to click on a station and find out how many stalls are actually available versus occupied versus down, not operating? And if I understood what you were telling Eric, that's a second generation of your app you're working on. Is that correct, or did I mishear?
That's correct. So currently we do have station level offline online status. So we know if a full station is active, but then the granularity of which chargers are in use or offline or online, for example, that's something we're bringing to the second version of our app, which we'll be testing this summer. And so that will be, we hope to have that in market by end of Q3.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions in the room?
This isn't really about the app. I'm just curious if he has any idea. I mean, I know Tesla's got their Magic Dock. Would the other companies do something like Magic Dock that would allow Teslas? Like if I didn't buy the adapter and
So I know EVgo has some of their chargers have Tesla connectors on it. They just have a separate hose, because I do that on road trips. I think ChargePoint also has some Teslas. I think that's really the only two that I know of.
To your point, Keith, EVgo is the only major network that has commercially added the Tesla connector to their locations. To your question about Magic Dock, there are only 10 stations in the US currently that do have Magic Dock. There are 8 in New York and 2 in California. I think that over time, we'll see Tesla try to implement this, where they can. The biggest conundrum we run into is the fact that based on the layout of their chargers, where you naturally have to back into it as a Tesla owner, where the plug connector goes on various EVs, it can block 2 chargers at once. And so I think that's part of why they're piloting this right now to kind of test and see how that'll look. As to other networks adding the Tesla connector, I think we'd probably end up seeing an adapter first before we ended up seeing an actual Tesla connector at these stations. And partly that is due to how the government is going to be offering up federal funding for example, what is called the NEVI fund, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund, is they have called out that it does need to have the CCS connector, which they refer to as the standard for North America. So I think simply from a politics and dollars and funding perspective, it may be a while before we see other networks take that route to add Tesla connectors at their locations. But time will tell. I think that either way, Tesla's not going to give up their North American connector because it is frankly quite elegant. It's very simple to use. It's lightweight. And I think that until we see the government step in and mandate a standard, we will have 2 competing plug types in that way for the foreseeable future.
yeah, I mean, I can only imagine how it's hard for me as a Tesla owner to sometimes figure out, I have to go from Bakersfield to Mojave, but Tesla's telling me that I have to go half an hour out of my way before I can, and I ended up charging in Tehachapi, and I thought I was going to get like a fast charge, but I didn't have the adapter, so I had to go tell my friends, we're going to sit here for an hour, guys, sorry. But I can only imagine how difficult for non-Tesla, it's gonna be terrible for them.
It's a lot to navigate, and that's one of the things that is what we're trying to help people have is through a wayfinding system. Is they can at face value know that their connector awaits them, and they understand what the power level is that awaits them. But then the details underneath that are the various networks based on who you can charge with, based on, for example, if you have a free charging session through Electrify America, if you buy a brand new ID4, things like that. We do have a quick filter in our system for any vehicle that is plug-in charge capable, which is very similar to Tesla's system, but it's for green plug vehicles. Is Mach-E, for example, has plug-in charge, and you can quickly just select plug-in charge stations only in the filters of the networks to then only see pins on the map where you can simply just drive up, plug in, and it just activates. So we've done our best to think about all these different touch points and use cases based on the vehicle that you've selected. So more and more different little details like that keep surfacing over time, though. So without universality of plug type or payment options and power, it's still a lot to navigate. To your point, outside of the Tesla realm, it can be complicated, but we're hoping that our platform gives people a better wayfinding system.
All right, well, thank you so much for giving us your time, Matt, and thank you for this hybrid meeting.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And then if you're interested in a big, I think it's next weekend, the 14th, 17th, up in Portland, the show again.
Yeah, so yeah, EV Roadmap is going to be held up here, beginning of the week, so May 15th, 16th, and 17th. Again, that's industry trade show, but obviously if you're in the industry, you want to meet people from the industry, it's really a great conference to attend. Also, in Southern California, the following weekend, the weekend of the 20th and 21st, there's the Electrify Expo event in Long Beach. And the previous day to that, on Friday, May 19th, I will be speaking at their Industry Day conference. And so they have an industry focused day on Friday, but they have an open event to the public on Saturday and Sunday where you can go and test drive EVs. Also, they have a micromobility section for electrification as well. And they are really trying to grow this as a public facing kind of a festival event where people can really just kind of come and interface with a variety of electrification options. So I will be also at the Electrify Expo event in Long Beach the weekend of the 20th and 21st. So if anybody wants to make the trek up from San Diego, would love to meet in person. And it would be great to, again, meet and chat with as many of you as I can, but definitely give it a look. It's a very worthwhile event. They've done a very good job of setting it up, and I think it's going to invite a lot more people to EVs. So,
yeah. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thanks.